Hello and welcome to Shikara Academy's UPSC Mains PYQ series. In this series, we will be discussing all the GS Mains questions asked by UPSC from the year 2013 to 2024. Today is our day 13. Let's begin. Now, this particular question was asked by UPSC in last year 2024 General Studies Paper 1. How far the Industrial Revolution in England responsible for the decline of handicrafts and cottage industries in India? A 15-mark question that needs to be answered in 250 words. Now, mapping it with the syllabus, we can see that it has come from the world history part, that is event of the 18th century such as Industrial Revolution. So this question is basically asking the impact of Industrial Revolution on Indian handicrafts and the cottage industries in India. Taking a look at the approach, we will be doing the IBC approach, the introduction, body, conclusion. In introduction, we describe the Industrial Revolution, give the timeline. Along with that, we connect, in the second line, we connect the introduction and the body. So in the second line introduction, we connect it with the body. In the body, we mainly address the demand of the question. Address the demand of question, that is the impact of the Industrial Revolution on Indian handicrafts and the cottage industry, and also the impact of British policies in addition to the impact of Industrial Revolution. Then in conclusion, we summarize the answer and give a forward-looking conclusion. Starting with the introduction, the Industrial Revolution, which began in England, so place where it began in the late 18th century, the time fundamentally transformed the global manufacturing and trade. So we have described Industrial Revolution in this line. Now in the second line, we'll be connecting it for what will be there in the body. So we will connect the introduction and the body. Its effects extended far beyond Europe, deeply impacting colonial economies like India, where traditional handicrafts and cottage industry had long thrived as a vital source of employment and culture and export revenue as well. Now, in the body, we mainly discuss the impact of Industrial Revolution on Indian handicrafts and the cottage industries. First, there is technological disruption and mass production. The introduction of advanced machinery such as the spinning jenny and power loom enabled the British factories to produce textiles and other goods at unprecedented speed and low cost. So, the speed of the production has increased and the cost of production has come down. The Indian handmade goods, on the other hand, especially textiles like the Dhaka muslin, could not compete with the volume or price of the British machine-made imports, leading to a sharp decline in demand and widespread unemployment among the artisans. So the Indian handmade goods, the Indian handmade textiles, like the Dhaka muslin, they couldn't compete with the volume, like the sheer volume and the low price at which the British were making these products and importing it in the Indian market. So this resulted in the sharp decline in the demand, which led to the unemployment of these artisans involved in these handicraft industries. Secondly, the colonial trade practices and the market manipulation. The British imposed high tariffs on the Indian exports to England while allowing duty-free entry of British goods into India, creating an uneven playing field. So the trade policies of the British were very unfair. So they used to they used to impose very high tariffs on the exports from India to England. But on the other hand, goods that were coming from the Britain or England to India was duty-free. The Charter Act of 1813 and other colonial policies dismantled India's export markets and forced the artisans to sell their products at low prices, further stifling the competition. Okay, so the Charter Act and the corresponding policies of the British, it allowed the Indian markets, it dismantled the Indian markets and forced the artisans to sell their products at a very low price and killed the competition in such a way. The East India Company established the monopolies over raw materials and handicraft products, dictating price and exploiting the local craftsmen. So ultimately, the East India Company, the British East India Company, it got monopolized all the raw material supply as well as the handicraft products. Economic and social consequences. India was reduced to a mere supplier of raw materials and a consumer of the British manufactured goods. So on the one hand, we Indians, we became the supplier of the raw materials and we became the consumer of the British manufactured goods. Okay, resulting in the deindustrialization and economic drain. The collapse of the traditional industries led to massive unemployment, poverty, and erosion of the artisanal skills and cultural heritage. So these traditional industries, they declined, which led to unemployment, poverty, decline in our cultural heritage as well. The loss of royal patronage and the inadequate support for technological adoption further weakened the cottage sector. So the cottage sector ultimately, because all the kingdoms were directly or indirectly controlled by the East India Company, so there was loss of royal patronage and inadequate support in the technological adoption. Now, was the industrial revolution itself in England was the reason behind decline in India's handicraft and cottage industry? We cannot say so because the impact of the other British policies were also detrimental to these handicrafts and as well as the cottage industry. So while the industrial revolution was a major factor, the decline was not inevitable. Deliberate colonial policies prioritized British economic interest over the development of Indian industries. So the British economic interests were at the paramount of the policy making and like on the cost of the which these policies were detrimental to the development of Indian industries. Some sectors like embroidery and weaving in certain regions survived, but on a very much reduced scale. The introduction of railways and Western education did open new opportunities, but what they did was like these primarily benefited the British capitalists or led to the export of raw materials rather than the growth of indigenous industries. So the introduction of railways and the Western education ultimately benefited the British capitalist class only. In conclusion, we summarize the answer. So the Industrial Revolution in England was largely responsible for decline of handicrafts and cottage industries in India through technological superiority, mass production, and exploitative colonial policies. Okay, the dismantling of the India's traditional industries was not just a byproduct of industrial progress, but was accelerated by the deliberate economic strategies that favored the British interests. Writing a forward-looking line now, the reviving traditional crafts today requires integrating modern technology and ensuring fair market access to the artisans. So this is our forward-looking line or the way forward in conclusion. Okay. So the PDF of this model answer will be available to you on the Telegram channel as well as the WhatsApp channel of Shikara Academy. Thank you.